Mario Kart Wii has shortcuts, and a good number of them are pretty famous, especially ultra shortcuts. They're a pretty well-known exploit right there, but that's just it, guys. They're exploits. Now, the reason I got an idea to make this video was actually from this comment right here on an old video of mine. You can go ahead and read it. It's not like a crazy comment or anything. Thank you for commenting it, by the way. I'm gonna put your name on screen. But I'm sorry, there's actually no theory that ultra shortcuts are intentional. Anyway, that got me thinking, what Mario Kart Wii shortcuts are actually intentional? There's plenty that are intentional, okay, don't get me wrong, but there's also plenty that might be intentional, but it's kind of hard to tell. First, I wanted to point out the difference between two different types of intentional shortcuts that I have devised. So if the developers had to go out of their way to make the shortcut, or intentionally design the track to make the shortcut possible, it's type 1. Type 2 is a type of shortcut that the developers are aware of, and it's not game-breaking, but the track was not explicitly designed for that shortcut to exist. So today we're going to look at a bunch of Mario Kart Wii shortcuts, and we're going to try to figure out if they're unintentional or intentional. And furthermore, which type of intentional. First, we've got the Luigi Circuit sand shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and say this one's intentional. I mean, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure there's a staff ghost that uses this in its runs. No, I don't think that's a crazy take. I think a lot of people can agree that this one's intentional. And if you don't believe me, why is there not a pipe here? Of course, a lot of people go inside this pipe and only use one mushroom to cut across the sand, which I wouldn't say that's unintentional. I don't think the developers see that as an oversight in the game. But the easier, maybe slightly more intentional route is to go around that pipe because, I mean, they literally didn't put a pipe there for that reason. Or at least that's what I'm guessing. Something to keep in mind, the developers were making this game with the intention of shortcuts being possible by all of the vehicles. Well, I mean, like, I think. So even though it's pretty easy for the Flame Runner to fit in between the fence and the pipe here, I'm not so sure about, like, the off-roader. So that's why it makes sense to leave a bigger gap between these two pipes so that every single vehicle can squeeze through there. And for this, I'm saying it's intentional. Let's move on. Next up is the Moo Moo Meadows low jump. It's a pretty easy unintentional. There's absolutely no way the developers left this in on purpose. It just, everything about it kind of screams unintentional. I don't want to overthink it. It just looks unintentional. I'm not going to call it intentional. Plus, we have a bigger shortcut to talk about next. So the Mushroom Gorge gap jump, it's kind of like a poster child of shortcuts for this game. And I think from the untrained eye, it's easy to write it off as unintentional, but listen to me now. It is intentional, and I have a couple reasons to show for it. The first reason is the height difference between the gaps. Like really, they could have made the mushroom section go down a little bit more so that it's even ground the whole way and you wouldn't be able to jump across it, but they didn't. And I think that's one piece of evidence for being intentional. Another important detail about this shortcut, every single vehicle in the game can do it. And bear with me on this last one, but if they didn't want you to do a gap shortcut, why would they have put a gap there in the first place? I mean, I understand it's a mushroom gorge and they need to stick to the theme here, but there are other mushrooms that you can use to bounce over gaps in other parts of the track. It would make a whole lot of sense and fit with the theme if you could jump over this one too. Jumping is like a super integral part of this track, so it makes sense to have it at the end of the track too. It's also such a well-placed shortcut. Like there's no way this just happened to be a really good shortcut at the end of a race, which saves like the perfect amount of time for a shortcut. I just don't see it being unintentional. In fact, I'm gonna say it's a type 1. I mean, really, I think the developers knew exactly what they were doing here. Anyway, we're going to Toad's Factory next with the lake shortcut, and it's intentional. The lake shortcut, like the gap jump, has a height difference from where you take off and from where you land, and why would they do that if they didn't want you to cut off the gap? But I have to make a distinction. With a mushroom, intentional. Without a mushroom, unintentional. I don't know if they left in TF physics on purpose or not, and if they did leave it on purpose, I doubt it was for doing the TF shortcut shroomless. And that's a stretch. I don't think the developers intended for TF physics to be in the game, and even if they did, I don't think they knew the applications that it had. So we're going to say with a shroom, intentional type 2, without a shroom, unintentional. Moving to DK's Summit, the single, easily intentional. Type 1 maybe, I'm not sure. It could be type 2, but I think it's type 1. But with a double, hot take here, I actually think it's unintentional. Maybe that's not a hot take, not really sure. I know in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that is definitely intentional, but we're not talking about that game right now. In this game, it's kind of up in the air. I'm saying unintentional because with every vehicle, it's a little different. With outside drift, it's way harder. Also, they extended this red fence really far. I think this was a design choice to make it easier to do the single, or really just possible to do the single. And what it shows to me is that they didn't keep in mind that the double would be an opportunity. So that's why I'm saying unintentional. Feel free to tell me if I'm wrong though. The next one, all right, bear with me now. It's not a shortcut, but the Koopa Cave Shroomba is an intentional type 1 shortcut. I mean, it's not really a shortcut. It's strategy thing, you know? You bear with me here. Luigi Circuit, no enemies. Moo Meadows, cows, which, I mean, as friendly as they are enemies because they hurt you. Now, when you play Moo Meadows for the first time, you might learn that if you throw a red shell, green shell, I don't know, something at them, they jump, which shows that if you throw stuff at enemies, you get a reaction. Moving to the next cup, we have Mario Circuit. Boom, Goombas. The racer probably already knows that if you throw something at an enemy, something happens. So let's say they do it again and throw it at a Goomba. Boom, mushroom flies out. That's huge. They go to pick up the mushroom. Now the racer, who knows that Goombas give mushrooms, sees a Goomba conveniently placed right in front of a grass patch, which also is just the perfect length for getting through with one mushroom. Another piece of intentional design maybe. So the driver decides to throw it, and if he misses, don't worry, there's another Goomba that he can try again on. And another. Because of this natural progression of Goomba-ness, I'm going to say that this is actually intentional type 1. Or type 2. I don't really know. But I'm going to say type 1. Let's move on. Next, we got the Grumble Volcano rock hop. Come on, guys. Don't overthink it. That's unintentional. Listen, I know it doesn't make a ton of sense to make this rock drivable unless you wanted it to be a shortcut. And let's not forget that they did not intend for you to do ultra shortcuts, yet they still made this rock drivable. In fact, they made the rock to the right of the finish line drivable too, and this rock, for some reason, they made a lot of stuff drivable on this track when they probably shouldn't have, or really didn't have to. So just because this one's drivable does not mean that it's intentional. Next, we got the Dry Ruins Ultra. I'm just going to go ahead and say this is unintentional. With an asterisk, I don't really think the entire thing is unintentional. For example, I think the developers would have been perfectly okay with you taking this route and then dropping down at the end after using 2 mushrooms. Taking 3, I mean, maybe the developers thought it could be a possibility, but I'm not so sure. They also planted 2 trees over here, possibly to make sure that you wouldn't be able to, or just make it a lot harder to cut off all of that with just a couple mushrooms. It almost feels like the developers knew it could be a possibility, but didn't want it to be. So I'm gonna say unintentional. Finishing off the nitros, we've got this little gap shortcut thingy on Rainbow Road. I don't really know what the name of it is. In my notes, I put Rainbow Road little wheelie over gap thingy. So yeah, I'm just kind of lost here. But I do believe this one's intentional type 2. Maybe type 1 intentional. They did angle the road up here to make it a little bit more possible. And because of the curve of the road at the end, you get a really nice landing like every time. It's really sweet. Still gonna go type 2 though. There are a lot of turns on Rainbow Road that are, for lack of a better word, curvy. So just because this one's curvy too doesn't really mean it's intentional. Therefore, yeah, the shortcut's intentional, but type 2. We have now entered the retros, which means Nintendo has already worked with these tracks before. So if there were any shortcuts that they didn't want to be in there, they have a second shot now in Mario Kart Wii to take them out. So expect to see a lot less unintentional shortcuts here. For example, this one on Ghost Valley 2. The Shroom shortcut and the Shroomless shortcut are definitely type 1 intentional shortcuts. I mean, they put a ramp there for a reason. They wanted you to take it. Next, we're going to talk about Raceway. No, not a Raceway shortcut, just Raceway. So I don't actually have a shortcut to talk about on this track. I mean, there are a couple grass shortcuts. I think we're all familiar, or if you're not, let me introduce you to Mario Raceway. Maybe the craziest track in the game. People typically know that this track is just bonkers with the amount of shortcuts that you can take super easily with like a golden or a star. Yeah, no lead is ever safe. I haven't played Mario Kart 64 extensively, so I don't really know if the craziness goes from this game to Mario Kart 64 as well. But I've heard it's a pretty crazy game, items-wise at least, so if it's crazy in Mario Kart Wii, I'm sure it's about the same in 64. If the developers saw how crazy this track was in 64 and decided not to change it in Mario Kart Wii, I think that was an intentional design. I mean, pretty much every turn is completely surrounded with grass, so of course it's going to be really easy to cut stuff off. There's no way the developers saw this and didn't think that it was going to be a crazy track. Doino Square dock, easy intentional type 1. They literally built the whole dock so that you could take it. I mean, if you're talking about modifying a track for a shortcut, this is a prime example. All right, let's move on. Next is the RWS turn skip. Mario Kart Wii definitely isn't foreign to sticking to the wall on certain turns. It's true that some are unintentional, like the Dry Ruins wall glitch, but this one, it's definitely intentional. There's no zipper ramp that extends to the end of the turn, which might lead some people to thinking it's unintentional, but like, why would they put item boxes there if they didn't want you to take it? Without a mushroom. Yeah, sure, I can see how that's unintentional, but with a mushroom, come on, that's definitely intentional. Next, we got the Desert Hills. I'm gonna say it's intentional. Obviously, I don't think that's that crazy to say. What I'm not so sure about is whether it's type 1 or type 2. I'm gonna say type 2, but at this point, I don't really know. I do understand it's called Desert Hills. So shortcut or no shortcut, there's gonna be, you know, hills. But they also made the out of bounds recede a whole lot so that you could take this shortcut. They also did this on 2 other turns on the same track, that being going behind the pyramid and cutting off this turn. Listen, I don't think it's crazy that the out of bounds doesn't extend very far, but leaving all this room, I mean, come on, that's gotta be intentional. So I'm saying intentional, and you know what? I changed my mind. It's type 1 now. That receding out of bounds layer is telling. Like, come on, that's just type 1 right there. BC3 is the next topic of conversation. Unintentional. Come on. This specific kind of yellow bump was introduced in a lot of the retro courses for Mario Kart Wii that weren't 3D already, which means they're new, and new stuff has a higher likelihood of being broken. And they are broken. Like, really broken sometimes. Have you seen the clips of people getting powed on these things? It's hilarious. Furthermore, the Ultra. There's no way Reggie had this in mind. GCN Mario Circuit grass shortcut. First of all, on no clips, all of the chain chomps are like halfway into the ground, which I think is really funny. Here's a good look at him. I don't know what he's doing in there. But looking at the shortcut from afar, let's say it's intentional type 2. I think I already mentioned it at the beginning of the video, but it's type 2 because the developers didn't exactly design the whole track around it. Or maybe they did. Look at this wall. Why doesn't it extend very far? I mean, if they didn't want you to take it, they would have extended the wall to the end. So, like, why did they scrunch it up? Maybe it is type 1, but I'm going to say type 2 because I went back on my word on Desert Hills. I'm not doing that again. Second to last, we got the Peach Gardens flower shortcut. What do you think? Intentional type 1. If the developers didn't want you to take it, they would have put like a fence in between it or something, or just not put it there at all, or put water. They put water on other parts of the track, and hey, let's just recognize that the chain chomps are out of the ground this time. So boom, intentional, and they put it there so that you could use it as a shortcut, therefore type 1. Lastly, we've got the BC64 rail ride. The more I keep looking at these on no clips, the more I'm leaning towards them all just being type 1 intentional. But this one, I still don't think it's type 1. Whether it be for decoration or function, they do have this railing across like pretty much the entire ending of the track. And of course they're going to extend it to the very end. They wouldn't be very good designers if they didn't. So for that, I'm giving it intentional type 2. But if you think it's unintentional, I wouldn't disagree too hard with you. So with that, we've concluded all the shortcuts I wanted to talk about today. If you think I'm completely wrong and want to scold me in the comments about some shortcut being intentional or unintentional, please go. Do it right now. Feel free. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button too. That should be on the way down to the comment section. If you want to see more Mario Kart Wii shortcut videos, let me know in the comment section down below, and we'll get it to you. With that, stay safe, stay cute, stay loyal, cause I already know you are. And goodbye.